Welcome to 1.7, Property Taxes. So last class we looked at the idea of mill rates. Mill rates again determine how much property tax a person should pay. Now we're going to look at actually calculating the property tax. Now we already said that the property tax is one of the main sources of revenue for the municipal government. They use it to pay their daily expenses, build the roads, mayor's salary, all that fun stuff. Property taxes again are paid by people who own the property within the municipality. So if you own a house or an apartment block or any property inside the municipality, you get to pay the property tax. There are four parts to our property taxes. First one is the general municipal. This money just goes to the government for their general day-to-day funds. The next is the local improvements, and again those are improvements made to your property. I gave the example last lesson about the tree on my boulevard that the city took out and planted a new one. Third one is the provincial education tax. And again, this is used to run the entire education system, our example of the provincial exams. And finally, the school division tax. They use that to run the actual individual schools within the local school division. So to pay for the lights, the heating of Nelson McIntyre is paid for by the school division tax. In order to calculate this, we're going to use forms that are found in this book and those government handouts that we've been using to do our mortgages. Let's look at the steps to do the property tax. So first thing we need to do is determine our total portioned assessment. Now the government is not going to make us pay taxes on the full value of our property, but rather a portion of that. So how do we figure this out? First thing we do is we take the value of our land and our property and add them together. We are then going to multiply that by our portion percentage. Well, how do we figure this out? We got to go to our charts. Let me pull them up for you. Two charts that we need. First one is we got to figure out what is our property classification. We've got residential 1, 2, farm, a whole bunch here. Residential 1 is if we have fewer than 5 dwelling units. So if there are 1 to 5 families living on that property, residential 1. If we have more, say in a large-scale apartment building, you'll be a residential 2. And of course, living on a farm, taxes for, say, a hospital or a school, and everything else. I'm going to guess that 99.9% of our questions will deal with residential 1, but just so you're aware, there are other categories that we could be paying taxes on. Once you have your category, you switch to figure out the actual portion. So again, we go to our second chart, and we got all of these nice, lovely classifications on the left, and we've got the actual percentages on the right. Now, this is a very, very old chart. Our newest date is 2001, so we will be using those dates. So if we have a residential 1, our portion percentage would be 45%. So we go back to our notes here. So we're taking that value of our land and buildings and multiplying it by 45%, which will determine how much we need to pay for taxes. Next thing is one of our first of our four types of taxes, the general municipal tax. Well, we take the TPA, which we just calculated, and we multiply that by the general municipal mill rate. And again, this will be determined by the municipal government. So it's a straight multiplication, and then we want to divide by 1,000. Remember last lesson when we had to multiply by 1,000 to get a mill rate? Well, now we're taking that 1,000 out by dividing. The next is our local improvement. First thing you have to determine is what improvement is being done to your property and figure out the cost per foot of that improvement. Well, to do that, we have to switch to our charts again. We are going to come down here, look at our third portion of our charts. We've got our improvements running down the left-hand side, the number of years we'll be paying that for, and the cost per foot. So let's just say we have a asphalt surfacing. We'll be paying that for 10 years, and it's $13.41 per foot. We will stick to improvements that are found on this chart, although in real life we could go beyond these. So you find it, get the cost per foot. Once we have our cost per foot, then we're going to multiply it by something called our frontage levy. Our frontage levy is basically the amount of our property that's touching the street. Well, what's that actually look like here? Let's try to draw a little picture. Here's my road, the street that I live on. Then of course I've got all these properties that are coming off the street. So if this one is mine, here's my little house. Here's maybe a garden in the back, a little driveway. So if this is my property, my frontage is from the extreme right of my property to the extreme left of my property. And this is the frontage. In the city of Winnipeg, they range from 30 to 60 feet. So we need to calculate the amount of frontage that our property has. Multiply that by the cost per foot, and that becomes my local improvement. Next, I've got my provincial education tax. Well, this again starts with my TPA, which was used or calculated in the first step, and I multiply it by my provincial education mill rate. Now, of course, this will be different from the municipal mill rate because this is set by the provincial government. Same idea, you multiply by the mill rate and then divide by 1,000. The fourth one is our school division tax. And again, we start with our TPA. So our TPA is coming down, and we're multiplying it by the school division mill rate. So the school division will set their own mill rate based on their budgetary needs. And again, we divide by 1,000. The last thing we have to do is realize or understand that the Manitoba government gives a tax credit of $600 to all properties. This is built into our property taxes, so when we are calculating our final amount, we have to subtract this $600 as a tax credit. Okay, now let's take a look at our example. So I'm going to scroll down. You can turn your page. I've manipulated my page a little bit so I can fit it all on your screen, but the information still is the same. We've got a house that has an address of 1 Example Crescent. Our property footage is 50 feet. We've got a land and a building amount, and then we've got three mill rates and 2 local improvements. So let's start filling out our form here. Now, because it's our example, I'm not really going to worry about putting in the address, but you could fit the address in right here. We're going to start here with calculating our TPA, our total portion assessment. Right here is our start. We're going to go with the land. What's the value of the land? It's $25,900. And my buildings is $82,500. So put those in there. Our status code, we don't worry about that. But our total assessment, we're going to add these two together, and we're going to get $108,400. Simply add. So I'll put a little plus sign here. Our property classification, well, this is a single dwelling, so if we go to our charts, our single dwelling has a property classification of 10 and a portion percentage of 45%. Let's fill that out. Property class is 10, and the 45%, I'm going to change directly to a decimal, so it's 0.45. So I take my 108,400 and I multiply it by 0.45, and I'm getting 48,780. This is my TPA, my total portion assessment. I'm going to use this in 3 spots. I'm going to use it here, here, and here. So my TPA is 48,780. I'm going to fill it in 3 times. Now you will notice here that I've got 2 provincial education taxes. I only pay one of them. So I'm going to cross out the second one and only pay the first one. My TPA was $48,780, and for my school division tax, it's $48,780. So once my TPA is calculated, I'm going to come do my general municipal taxes. My TPA times my mill rate. My general municipal mill rate is 23.435. So I'm going to type that in right here, 23.435. So in order to calculate this, I'm going to multiply, put a little x here for multiplication, and then divide by 1,000. So 48,780 times 23.435 divide by 1,000 gives me $1,143.16. Now I'm going to jump to my provincial education tax. My provincial education mill rate is 7.984, so I'm going to type that in, 7.984. Again, same idea, I multiply and then divide by 1,000, which will give me $389.46. Next, I'm going to do my school division tax. So my school division mill rate is 18.326. 18.326. Same idea, I multiply and then divide by 1,000, and I get $893.94. Next thing I have to do is my two local improvements. So in this case, I've got the boulevard construction and a lane lighting. So my type is the boulevard. Write that in. And my lane lighting. I'll just put down lane. So this starts with my frontage levy. Well, how much frontage do I have on this property? Coming from the question, it's 50 feet. So I'll put in 50 feet twice. And now I got to figure out these costs per foot. So I go back to my charts, look at my bottom one, and I've got my boulevard construction, which is $3.60. And I've got a lane lighting, which is 45 cents. So I'll come back and fill those out. The boulevard was $3.60, and the lane lighting was 45 cents. Now in these ones, it's a straight multiplication. There's no division at the end. So I take 50 times 360, and I get $180. Then I take 50 times 0.45, and I get $22.50. So I've calculated the total portion assessment. I've paid my 4 types of charges. The last thing I have to do is this tax credit. So I need to take off $600. So in order to show subtraction, what I'm going to do is put in, sorry about that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in brackets. So bracket, okay, sorry about that. We had a little technical difficulties, but I think we fixed them. So we were talking about our property taxes with our provincial credit of $600. So we have to subtract that 600. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the $600 in brackets. When you see a number in brackets, it's another way to mean subtraction. So this bottom of the chart, you can fill it if you like, but it's not necessary. All I really have to do now is simply add my 5 numbers together and then subtract $600. And when you do that, my final property tax should be $2,029.06. So once a year, I will get a bill that is broken down, just like you see it here, for $2,029.06. We can now turn to our assignments, and the lesson should have 5 questions, and you should have enough charts in your book provided for you to finish up that lesson.